Welcome to Life Burst. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt. Well, trains, white goods, and camellias. We've got all that to come as we continue to hear Wendy's story.
Yes, welcome to Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. And today we are continuing our conversation with Wendy. But if you didn't hear part one, don't worry. It's okay. You can catch up at another time. We're going to give a little bit of a recap, though, for people who may not have got that first part. So the part of the story that we're really up to right now is that you are madly in love with a guy.
Yep.
And you just want to marry him. And you've been to university before, but you kind of just kept stopping. Your father was the one that invented the dishwasher, and you've shared some life adventures with that. But yes, we are at the part where a man has said who you want to marry, has said, you got to go back to uni if you want to marry me. And because you're madly in love with him, and now you have been married for how long?
6 months.
Okay, yeah.
So I rocked up an enrolment day at the uni. This is before electronic forms, and everything was in paper. And I filled out my application form, and it did take rather a long time. But
By the way, you're in your 30s at this point.
yeah, I'm 32 now. And I reapplied to do fourth year, and they accepted it. And I found out 6 months later that apparently there is a time limit on the duration of your degree. When you start and when you finish. I had exceeded that time limit, but I didn't know anything about that. So I just merrily rocked up thinking I could automatically finish. And they had consulted together and decided to let me come through and do my fourth year again, even though I exceeded the limit. But they weren't expecting me. So they had no fourth year project for me to do. And they got me to repeat a project that had been done in the previous year, but they'd got peculiar results and they needed to do it again. And this time round, there was one other woman in the class.
Okay.
Oh, that's exciting.
I wasn't
for you.
the only one.
Novel.
Yay.
And I was accustomed to the system. Also, I was accustomed to working. I was accustomed to starting at 7:30, having 30 minutes for lunch, and not 31 minutes, and finishing at 4:30 exactly. And I had just got married. I had 3 kids to look after. I had a loud, opinionated, noisy husband, loud children who all thought I should be able to listen to 4 people at the same time and answer them appropriately. And I had to take control instead of being a quiet little person who lived on my own to looking after a family. And now I was going back to uni. So I treated it in the same manner as work. I got to uni, I spent the entire duration of the day studying, whereas before I'd go for a walk in the park or go to the art gallery or go to the library and do fun things. No. I spent every minute of the day working, because when I got home, studying was really hard and having free time. And things went quite well. During the year, there was an incident. One of the students decided to start putting up pornography on a pinboard in the common room where we studied. And then this expanded to a series of 6 partitions covered in it.
Okay.
And I was working back there one late afternoon. They'd all gone home. And I decided that I didn't like this. So I got a big Texticolor and started colouring in clothes on all the ladies. But Texticolors give me a headache. I think it's the chemicals in them.
Right.
And also I didn't have an unlimited supply, and it was rather time-consuming giving them clothes. I thought, this can't go on. I'll just rip them all up and put them in the bin. So I did. I destroyed the whole lot, put them in the bin, finished my assignment, and went home. The next day I came in, and the mood was really weird in the common room. and people were in hushed little corner groups discussing things. And I said to one of the guys I chatted with, I said, what's going on? It's really strange. He said, oh, someone came in and destroyed so-and-so's art collection. And I don't know who it was. I said, well, I know who it was. Who? Me. I destroyed it. And of course, you realise at this stage I'm very religious. I've become a Baha'i. I'm a good, proper person. I say my prayers every day. I do the fast, and I believe in and living a good life. Mm-hmm. And I didn't approve of this. Mm-hmm. So later, I was asked in to see one of the senior lecturers. He said that the person whose artwork I had destroyed wants compensation.
Okay.
Because of all these expensive magazines he had to buy to get all these pictures. And I launched into a tirade. And I accused the lecturer of failing in his duties to look after us, because he provided him with the extra partitions. He knows that there are 2 women in the class. Members of the public and the secretarial staff may occasionally come into our common room, and this is totally inappropriate. And I absolutely refused to pay compensation. Also, I was broke.
Yeah.
This is about half of my motivation. But I was no way.
Stuck to your guns.
And he was...
Yeah.
Taken back.
You have to also understand that I was a mature age student at this stage. I was 32, and all the other students were like 18. No, they'd be about 20, 21. There were a couple of mature age students in the class, but the rest were quite young. So nothing more was ever said about it.
Right. You made your mark.
Yes.
Switch.
And of course in industry now, you get sacked for that.
Yeah, yeah.
That sort of thing's totally inappropriate. But they didn't realise what sort of world they were moving into. So,
did you find there were other things like that where it was difficult being a woman in that? There were 2 of you now, but in that environment?
No.
It
was the only thing that ever happened.
Yeah, good.
That's excellent.
I was still a fairly strange, forceful, loud person. And as an engineer, mechanical engineer, it's quite rare. Apparently it's very difficult to find a engineering salesperson to go to expos and promote things, because engineers tend to be extremely quiet and reserved and shy, rather like my father. But I had to change personalities after I got married. And I could stand up for myself quite well. And I'm also quite thick, and I don't notice things. So if there was any discrimination, I never noticed it.
Right. You
So
just got on with it.
yes, I was more promoted as a sort of token woman than discriminated against, because there was so rare being a woman and a mechanical engineer. There's a few more in civil and electrical, but not in mechanical. And it was a very good career for a woman, actually, because it's mostly desk work on a computer these days. And I never get dirty, except when I graduated, my husband said, we can go anywhere you can get a job. And I thought this was going to be very difficult. Before the previous time I did engineering, you have to have work experience. And I'd written out job applications to get work experience, but I wanted to disguise the fact that I was a girl. So I just put W. Bales. And subsequent to that, a curious thing happened one day when my mother was collecting the mail. The man who lived sort of diagonally opposite us came over and spoke to my mother and said, I didn't know you had a son. I don't have a son. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. He was the personnel manager at Mitsubishi.
Okay.
And I'd written an application there under W. Bales as a mechanical engineering student. He had just assumed I was a bloke. And I did get work there, but it was a really stupid job. I was in repack. I had to take things out of boxes and put them into new boxes. And in the packaging department.
Right.
Nothing
That's
to
what
do
you-
with my career
what you
at
studied
all.
for, isn't
It
it?
was production-like work.
Yeah.
And I was very good at it, actually. was quite good with my hands. So I thought getting a job would be really hard. And also there's this expression, it's not what you know, but who you know. And I thought this is a very bad expression. It's very prejudiced. It discriminates against people. So anyway, I had some references from members of the family, members of the family or my father's friends who were also engineers. And I rock up at a job interview with Railways. It turns out the man who's interviewing me was at this guy who gave me a reference, his house the day before for a barbecue.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there and we'll come back straight after this of Life Bursts with Matt and Sarah.
Welcome back to Life Burst with Sarah and Matt. We're continuing Wendy's story this week. Wendy, we've left you hanging. You've seen a fellow engineer across the room at a party. You've been looking for work. What happened next?
Well, I sent in an application to the Railways and I got a job with the Railways in Port Augusta.
Okay.
So we sold all our heaters because we thought it was hot in Port Augusta.
Right.
And we
So random.
packed up our house and moved to Port Augusta.
Uh-huh.
Now, the whole of the engineering office had been shifted down to Adelaide, and then they realised they still needed someone in Port Augusta. So I became the only mechanical engineer in the drawing office in Port Augusta. And one of my jobs was to print off drawings. Now, these were full-size drawings of locomotives. And when I say full-size, they were the length of a locomotive.
What?
And you'd print them in a great big printer and they come out wet. And then I would roll them out on the engineering office floor to dry and then take them out to the workshop. And they would tape them up to the side of a locomotive and the electrical tradesmen would go through. So they had all the diagrams there, what's meant to be behind it, and go through and service the locomotives.
Wow.
And also any other parts that needed to be done as well. And also when people went on leave, you would relieve their position. So from time to time I was in charge of the paint shop and the wheel shop and the motor shop and different things. So I got lots of varied experience working up there. But I had my own great big office and I was the only person there.
Okay.
Which suited me fine. I had little design projects, and one of the most curious jobs I had, that they were complaining that when they used the jib that used to, it's like a crane that's supported on the post, and they used to pick up the wheel axles with it, which are several tons, and shift them from the different turning machines and presses. They said when it moves, the building vibrates. So I got the diagrams of the building construction and I spent a couple of days trying to work out all the forces on it. And then I was trying to work out how much force goes in it when it moves. I thought, hang on a minute, it's on a bearing. So no force is meant to go through a bearing torsionally. That's the whole point of a bearing, that it will spin. So that shouldn't happen. There should be no force. The bearing's gone. So I rocked out to the workshop and told the foreman, the bearing's gone. Now, this is very bad news because this is a crane. And in order to service the crane, they have to bring the other crane, which is used for lifting locomotives, all the way up the workshop to the other end. And they have to take away all the brackets and equipment that are in the way so they can shift it all the way up the other end. They have to work over the weekend and get overtime. Several people have to do it, lift this jib crane up. And he said that if it was not broken, my name would be Mud. I didn't know this. Anyway, apparently when they lifted it up, it was in 100 pieces. It was definitely broken.
Well done.
So they replaced it, it all worked.
Excellent.
Yes. When I was up there, when you go out into the workshops, you have to wear steel caps, long sleeves, for in case you walk past someone who's welding. You don't want welding stuff to get on you, so it has to be cotton or something solid, not synthetics, and covered right down to your ankles, and your steel caps. Every time I went out the workshop, I'm about to step in there and I realised I'm wearing sandals all the way back to the engineering building. changing my steel caps all the way back out again. Eventually, I just gave up wearing sandals and shoes. I just wore my steel caps all day long. Now, as it happened at that time, the fitting of ladies' size steel caps was just perfect for me. I know other people who complained about the misery they had wearing uncomfortable shoes, but for me, they were perfect. I wore them when I went home. I wore them all weekend, especially out on picnics, because we were near Alligator Gorge and Wilmington. We used to go out and have great picnics when we were at Port Augusta. Very nice place for going on picnics. And they're good for climbing hills and gardening. Great. I wore them on holidays. I loved my steel caps. But after wearing them for several years, I could no longer wear high heels.
I guess
I haven't worn them since. My ankles just didn't have that skill anymore to hold me up after wearing flats for so long.
What shoes are you wearing right now?
Sandals.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
I don't own heels.
No, I'm meaning if they were steel cap.
No. They changed the size.
Oh, okay.
Yes, maybe it suited everyone else, but they no longer were perfect and comfortable anymore.
Take note, steel cap.
Yes.
Yes.
Bad luck. Anyway, so I was very little happy Vegemite up there. Then the family wasn't that happy in Port Augusta because the only people my husband could speak to in Farsi were in Adelaide. And we used to come to Adelaide a lot, but they wanted to go back. So I applied for a transfer, and unfortunately for someone in the office, he got diagnosed with terminal illness. And suddenly they rang me up and said, "Can you come tomorrow?"
Wow.
So I called a family meeting. I got the kids out of school, brought them home, and we consulted together. Had a big whiteboard and talked about all the different aspects of it. And we decided, yes, I would accept this job in Adelaide, but not tomorrow, the day after. So I had to go down to Adelaide and work during the week and come back up by train at the weekend. And then we bought a house in Adelaide. It was actually at Bradbury.
Right.
We came down for one weekend and found a house
In the hills.
in the hills with a big workshop for my husband.
Did you find any heaters? Because you would have had to buy heaters again.
Well, during this stage where I was working in Adelaide, during winter, it got cold. Apparently, they tried to light the wood fire that was in the lounge room for heat, and it smoked, of course, because it hadn't been used for years. So they're all sitting there freezing and crying with all the smoke and being miserable, and I wasn't there. And they had to go and buy a radiator. So when I came home at the weekend, we owned a radiator again because it actually gets quite cold in Port Augusta. The time to go out in Port Augusta for like holidays and things, in Adelaide we go out in summer, but in Port Augusta you go out in autumn and winter. That's the time you go sightseeing. In summer you stay indoors, and spring's very windy.
Right.
And a lot of people up there, they put aluminium foil over their windows in summer to keep the sun out. It's a cheap way of air conditioning. And we had a evaporative cooler in the house, a portable one, but we were right next to the main line.
Okay.
We were in a railway house, right next to the main line, the place where they used to idle the locomotives when they were waiting for another train to pass.
Yeah.
They don't turn them off when they have to wait because it drains the batteries and they can't start it again. So they tend not to turn locomotives off.
So serenity.
And they make a lot of noise, and we wanted the window open. And one night my husband said if he had an RPG-7, he'd use it. I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's a rocket."
Yep. So it was a little inconvenient.
But we had outside lighting from the civil engineering car park, so I could go outside at midnight and put the washing out.
That was so.
Our backyard was permanently lit.
Right. Wow.
And we lived only 2 houses away from the mechanical engineering building, so I could see my backyard and our crooked pergola that we'd built from the office window.
And you're washing.
And the washing. And I could go home at lunchtime and have some eggs and do a load of washing and come back to work again.
Yeah.
That's very convenient.
It was very
Very
convenient.
convenient. Well,
Yes.
we will be back to hear more of Wendy's story straight after this here on Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. Welcome back to Life Burst here with Matt and Sarah. Today we're chatting with Wendy. It is part 2. So you can go back on our YouTube and Facebook pages and you can catch up with part 1 if you'd like. Wendy, we are at the point where you are kind of in between Port Augusta and moving back to Adelaide to Bradbury.
Yes. So before I moved back, I just mentioned being a woman engineer and what do you wear?
Yes, that's a good question.
I had no
What do you
role
wear?
model.
Okay.
Being the second person to study mechanical engineering at Adelaide Uni and the previous one 20 years before me, there was no standard for what a female mechanical engineer would wear. And besides, up at Port Augusta, even if I looked at a locomotive, I got dirty. Nevertheless, apart from having to climb under one or climb under a wagon, and it's a dirty place up there. Railways is not a clean thing. So you have to have covered sleeves as well. And one of the jobs of engineers, if you find people who are fishing or reading a book or doing not what they're supposed to be paid to be doing, you're meant to report them. So you don't want everyone to know that you're about to walk into the workshop. And if I turn up in bright pink floral, they'll see me coming. Mind you, they could probably see me coming anyway. But I wanted to look, so I blended in.
Yeah.
And there were only 2 clothing shops in Port Augusta, the ladies and the men's. So I used to buy my clothes in the menswear store because the ladies' wear at that time was just totally unsuitable. And then I was chatting with the only other woman engineer who was there in civil, and she also bought her clothes from the menswear shop.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when I grew up as a child, I used to get hand-me-downs from my cousins, and they were boys. And I got to a certain age in primary school, and my mum announced that I had to start wearing girls' clothes. And so I was wearing new shirts. And I discovered that boys' shirts and girls' shirts button up the other way around.
Okay.
The buttons are on the other side.
Yeah.
And I couldn't button up the girls' shirts because I'd grown up in boys' shirts. My hands just didn't work that way. Had to relearn how to do buttons with the other hand.
So Port Augusta was bringing you back.
Yeah,
to that,
no worries. I can wear men's shirts.
like riding a bike. Yeah.
So I came back to Adelaide, and the next several years I used to design heavy freight vehicles,
Right.
which was great fun. And that stage we'd moved to computers, and you could 3D model them and do stress analysis on them. And then we had to build prototypes and actually almost destroy them in testing to prove that they were strong enough. And then you mass produce, small amount to produce wagons. And then the government decided to wind down the Australian National Railways and create something else and have different divisions. And so they closed down the entire office. And I had to find myself a new job. And I got a job instantly with Electrolux. And I went to washers. So I'm back in white goods again.
You are, yeah.
Yes.
Full circle.
And it was very strange because I was accustomed to designing things in 25mm plate. And 12mm plate to me was thin. And in washers, 1mm plate was heavy. And everything was really, really, really thin.
Okay.
And everything was lightweight. It was quite a culture shock. Nevertheless, I ended up with an experimental washing machine.
Yes.
Yay! The
Yeah,
poop story from
But
last
this
time.
time we're in Bradbury. We're not on Mains Water. And we have a laundry which faces the back veranda. And sometimes the chickens used to go in there and lay eggs as well. And we had a cleaning lady now. I'd really moved up in life. I had a cleaning lady.
Oh, wow.
So having 3 kids and working full time, you need a cleaning lady. You just can't do it all. And we had 2 acres. I liked gardening. I really loved gardening. Earlier in my life, when I finished high school, my parents took me to a consultant to see what sort of career would be good for me. And according to my testing, she said I should be a horticulturalist or a garden designer or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be the ideal career for me. But seeing as I was white-skinned and blonde and short, it wasn't a good career for me.
Okay.
I was the wrong sort of human being for that sort of career.
Mm-hmm.
And I went for engineering instead. Nevertheless, I still loved gardening.
Yeah.
Now, where am I? Cleaning lady.
Yes.
One day I got rung up at work saying the washing machine won't turn off and water is pouring out of it. So we get the technician on the phone and ask them, what does the digital display say? Have you turned the power off? Yes, we've turned the power off. Is the water still coming out? Yes.
Right.
So it filled right up the top and then it was just overflowing out the side. Eventually they got it to stop doing this. Then the next week, the cleaning lady is doing the washing again. The water keeps flowing out of the washing machine and won't turn off. So 3 technicians drove up to our house in Bradbury.
And this is the prototype.
This is the prototype.
so-
Of the washing
And apparently it had experimental new valves in it,
machine.
which were being promoted as anti-knock, so you wouldn't get a water hammer noises in the house every time the washing machine turned off and on all the time.
Yes.
But we had no mains water. We had a pump. And the pressure was lower than mains water. And these valves did not shut. They needed that high force of the mains water behind them to make them seal properly. So after they got opened, they just stay open.
Right.
And as there are many people in the country,
Yeah.
many of whom do not have laundries facing the back veranda where all the water can flow out onto the lawn. Imagine if it's inside your house. You'd ruin your carpets and your flooring. Oh, people would be very, very, very unhappy when that happened. So they had to cancel that idea.
Okay. Well, so you're a pioneer. You've,
Yes.
you know.
So we did keep that washing machine. We brought it to this house.
Okay.
And eventually the control panel started to wear out. And I rang up to get a spare part. And they said, oh, no, that model doesn't exist.
Okay.
And I said, of course it doesn't. It's a prototype.
So, yeah, so I had to, well, it looked like a full washing machine. Anyway, and I had a little glass tube thing like a perfume sample. And I had that in there and I pushed that to press the start button. And that worked for years until eventually we had to actually get a real one from a shop.
Okay. Yeah.
How did that feel? How did that
Oh, I
feel?
warned the salesman. I said, I'm a very difficult customer. I'm sorry about this.
I used to make these.
And we got a normal washing machine. So, an underbench one
Yep.
that spins instead of a top loader.
Right. Yes.
And then now as we're getting older, we discover we don't like bending down that far
Okay.
to get the washing in and out. So my husband welded up a frame so we can lift it up higher.
Yeah.
And it's easier to reach the clothes. Because from time to time I have bad backs and he has bad backs and anything that falls on the ground, we'll leave it there.
Some young person will come and pick it up.
We'll
It'll be
use my
fine.
dad's extension
Yeah, that's
handle with
right.
the pickup
Yeah. Where
stick.
did that go? Yeah.
It's very good for picking up kindling outside in the garden too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So after working there, I moved to ovens.
Okay.
Yes. I put in a job application. Prior to this, I'd had a dream one night where someone was trying to teach me about working in teams. And there's all these different points about working in teams and what you have to do as a team worker. And I had to memorize all this stuff and recite it. And this dream went on and on and on. I even woke up in the middle of it and went back to sleep again and went on until I could memorize all this stuff about working with teams. And then the dream finished.
Okay, we'll be back with more life
Oh, yeah.
right after this.
Interpreting dreams.
I know. This is so great. With Matt and Sarah, we'll be back.
This is Life Burst with Sarah and Matt. We're chatting to Wendy, part 2. And Wendy, you had this dream, and it was a very prolonged dream. But it
Yes.
stuck with you.
About working with teams.
Yes.
A few months later, a job came up in the cookers division, and I wrote an application. And if you're not hunting for jobs, no one who's person's not hunting for jobs, they have no skills at writing job applications. It's not something you do normally. So I had no skills at all. So this time I decided to write my job application based on the things in the dream and nothing else. So I sent it off, and it took a long time, and they rang up one day and apologised it had taken so long. So they had so many job applications, but I'm near the top. And could I please come for an interview? Now, just prior to then, we had renovated our kitchen at home. And because we had so many visitors, this is the woman who never entertained before she got married.
Things have changed.
Yeah.
I was accustomed to cooking very large quantities of food for all the people in my husband's workshop, because he treated his crash repairs as a help yourself workshop for young migrants who'd come here and didn't have a car and needed to fix one up, and so they could drive around and it wouldn't cost them too much.
Yeah.
And all these young guys who were hungry, and I'd have to feed them. And to cook some traditional Persian meal called osh, I needed a very large pot, a fry pan for the onion and the mint, and a saucepan for the spinach, and another thing, and I couldn't fit them on the stove. So I wanted to get a cooktop that was big enough. And I went to every cooking shop in Adelaide with my ruler and outstayed my welcome there, then had to move on to another one because I was there for too long. And I knew every cooking appliance that was available. And I rocked up to the interview and told them I knew every cooking appliance that was on the market in Adelaide. And I really meant it. And and I got the job.
Of course you did. All that time annoying people in customer service paid off.
Market research, yeah.
So I designed ovens
Right.
for
Larger
about
ones.
9 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And the upright cooker, I did the major redesign on that. So if you've got an upright cooker, I probably designed it.
Okay.
Then I did a lot of work on the parts for the built-in ovens. So I did all of the non-pretty bits.
Okay.
As a mechanical engineer, the industrial designers design what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And we have to make it all work.
Yeah.
And make the rest of it. So I did the sides and the back and the channels and the bottom and the interior mid thing that the fan sits on that you don't even know is in there, and the top panel and a few other brackets and bits and pieces. And I have to make it so you can make this size oven and this size oven with a separate grill, and this size for an underbench and this size for a double oven, and gas and electric. And I managed all the 3D models of these, and you send out the drawings and you check all the parts, the first off of the press, and you check the manufacturing and the construction. And I loved that job. So I go to people's houses and I look at their ovens.
Yeah, I was about to
I go to
say.
the kitchen and I open their oven.
I was about to say, is it like the car thing where you said in your first interview about that you can identify a car from the inside because you did all of the
The seat
Interior.
covers,
inside? Yeah. So you can identify somebody's oven by looking inside them.
Oh, well, they do have brands on the outside.
Yeah,
It
I
does
know,
help.
but if you bypass that.
Yes, I'm always interested in the inside of the oven.
Yeah.
So, and the racks and the chrome stuff, but not the baffle. Someone else did that. The baffle was in front of the inside fan.
Okay.
And we also sent us off to do a course on training in baking at Regency College. They decided to train all the engineers.
Okay.
And we did baking, and then we did another 3-day course on faults in baking.
Okay.
And one of the things to remember when you're cooking is that the whole purpose is to get heat into the food. You want the heat to get into the food. So glass. Is a glass a good conductor of heat?
No.
No. So why would you put it in a Pyrex dish? Why would you bake pastry and put it in a Pyrex dish? If you want the bottom not to cook, that's the way to do it. And then there's those silicon things. Is silicon a good conductor of heat?
No, I guess not.
No, it's not. So you wouldn't put your baking in silicon either. What you want It's something where the heat will transfer. Now, at that time, they didn't have bakeware with holes in it. These days, you can go to a shop and buy a pizza tray covered in holes.
Yeah.
This is how the heat will go through the bottom and heat up the bottom of your pizza when you're baking it. So you want air to circulate around it, because the heat comes out at the back if it's fan forced, and you need it to circulate around the front. So you don't want your food jammed up against the door. You want to leave a gap. These are my handy hints for baking.
You are, and there's
Cool
lots of
tips.
hand movements as well.
Metal
here.
bakeware, and leave room for the air to circulate.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also found that, or for me, if you have the oven fairly full, it becomes very moist.
Right.
So they advertise now steam ovens, or you can put a little cup of water in there to add your own steam. If you don't have a steam oven, it's quite easy. You can introduce moisture that way, or if you're just doing a lot of baking, the fact that you've got lots of food in there will create its own moisture. Another thing that our home economist taught me was that food, when it's cooking, gives out gases.
Right.
It's an outward process. So you don't get a transfer of flavours from one to the other inside the oven.
Right.
So you can cook a dessert and a roast, and your dessert does not taste like roast
Okay.
because the gases are going out. Once you turn the heat off and they start to cool down, they absorb gases.
Okay.
So this is when your dessert will start to smell and taste like roast. If you turn the heat off and they're cooling down. That's why you cover them
Okay.
before you put them in the fridge.
Yeah, right. Well, this is good.
Anything else that you want to share with us?
Any other tips?
Any other tips?
Well, I did get an oven pre-production line,
Okay.
as you do, and they had got the wiring diagram wrong.
Oh no.
So the little light that's meant to come on when it's hot enough was on permanently.
Okay.
They did tell me how I could fix it, but I am afraid of electronics, and I was not going to pull it out and change the wires around. So I just left it like that. But it meant that I could never tell when it was hot enough, unless the room was really quiet, and I put my ear next to the oven, not on it, because you might burn your ear, and you wind up the temperature until you hear it go click, and that's the heat coming on. And you know, it's at that temperature.
Right.
So if your light's not working, that's the way to tell.
The click.
You put the temperature down low and wind it up slowly, and you hear it go click. That's the temperature is reached, and now the heat is on to heat it up.
Not hitting it or anything to make it work.
No.
Okay.
We went on holiday once to Fiji, in a thing called Fiji Homestay, where you stay with local family. And this was in a sort of remotish island that didn't have a tourist resort. And everyone there had gas ovens, which their relatives who were working in Australia or New Zealand had paid for. Because mostly they cooked on coconut shell fires and baked, and they had some very, very good chefs there, ladies. And the kitchen was outside the house in a sort of wooden structure, not inside the house. But when they have wet season or cyclone or hurricane or whatever they have over there, bad weather, you can't cook outside in these little huts. You had to do it inside. So the gas oven would be inside the house. And they were nearly all rusted and worn out. And the chief's wife's cooker, she had to sit next to it and hold the button for it to work.
Okay.
So we went round fixing people's gas ovens on our holiday.
Holiday.
I became the Electrolux technician of the week.
Yeah.
If I had known that was going to happen, I would have taken spare parts with me,
Yeah.
because I knew how to fix them. I knew how to pull them apart and put them back together again really, really well, because I designed all of these ovens.
They had. Ah, great. We're going to be back with more of Wendy's story here on Life Burst with Matt and Sarah straight after this. Welcome back to Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. We're chatting with Wendy today, and we're just at the last part of her 2-part series, which you can catch up with on our YouTube or Facebook channel. So, Wendy, we've got a lot to fit into 10 minutes, but we can do this. Take the story
Okay.
to the next place.
So all my work in ovens and also helping out the test kitchen in Electrolux came in very handy years later. And when we moved to this house, I joined the Camellia Society, and I often have to do a lot of baking for the open days, for the trading table and the kitchen, mass-producing scones, slices, cakes, and I know how to use an oven. Even I wouldn't call myself a great chef, but I can bake. So I can whip up scones in a flash when we run out. Come home. Don't worry, I'll be back with 24 scones in half an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yep.
So these days, I do a lot of voluntary work at the Stangate House for the Camellia Society.
Beautiful.
And I have a garden full of camellias.
Yes, the flowers on the table.
Well, they're not camellias, but
No, but they're from your garden.
yes. Years ago, when I finished school, I mentioned that the career advisor said I should be a horticulturalist. Well, that is now my main hobby, is gardening, because I love flowers. And, of course, up here we're very close to Stagate House, and we have open days in September on every Sunday.
Right.
Yes, so please come along on our September open days, where the garden is just paradise. Also, we have a large team of volunteers, very happy little big volunteers, little and big, where we work on Tuesdays over there. And even this time of year, where there's no camellias out, it's still a beautiful place, and it's much cooler than all the other hotter regions. So when it's really hot, everyone still goes there, and we had 12 people turn up for our working bee last Tuesday, even though the weather was quite warm, because it's a nice place to be.
Out in the garden, enjoying with other garden lovers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you've also, this isn't your first time of being on television and radio.
Oh, yes.
is it?
We started making television programs,
Yes, you and your husband.
me and my husband, and I used to be the host. Hello and welcome to Global Civilization. I'm Wendy Azadegan. Thank you for joining us. And I used to be in this room on the other side of the room, and I had my set over there, and I had regular guests, and that was rather fun. And I did that for 12 years,
Right.
once a week, half an hour. Not a 1 hour
Community
program.
television.
Yes, community television. And also I did some voluntary work there as well as program manager for a while when I was out of work. So after I was with the Electrolux, I then went and joined a place called SIDAC. And SIDAC makes simulators for training train drivers.
Okay.
And these simulators are nearly all full size. So if you get in it, it's like being in a locomotive cab. They try to use all the real parts, all the real components, and if they can't get them, they have to get them manufactured to look like the real parts and feel like the real parts. And we have a large team of graphic artists who do the track so it looks like the real track, kilometres after kilometre after kilometre of it. And I used to work on the behaviour of the train
Okay.
and modelled behaviour with a modelling program. And I did that for many years, and then they have cycles in work, because these projects might last 18 months, and then you've got to wait for another contract, and sometimes there's a lull, and I lost my job during a lull, and that's when I started doing more work with the Camellia Society.
Okay.
But we still had our television programs as well. And then they asked me back again, and I went back sort of 6 months, 1 year, 6 months, 3 months. And then they had no more work for me, and then I was unemployed again for another year, and I got qualified for the age pension for 1 week. And then I get an email, Wendy, contact us at your earliest convenience.
Okay.
You had a job again.
So I was back again for another 3 years.
Wow, in demand.
I just retired.
Yeah.
I'm 69. So I may have started my engineering late, but I also finished it late.
Yes.
Yes. And I really did love my job. It was very rewarding. It's sort of, you're creating a teaching tool for teaching drivers. And one of the reasons they need simulators is a lot of the things, they want to train them on how to fix problems. Regular driving they can do in a real train, but they want to create faults and see if the drivers can deal with the faults and fix the faults and get back to the depot and get the passengers off the train, which is very important. If you've got 400 hot passengers in your train and you're broken down, you've got to get them back. So they have to learn how to manage all the controls on the train. And it's not just the things in the cab. They've got cupboards full of switchboards, cupboards down the train full of valves and switch and circuit breakers, all of which the driver can get to limp home. And I worked on lots of different types of trains. I've got some pictures here.
Right. Yeah.
Pictures.
Yes. The Eurostar.
The Eurostar. Yeah.
Yes.
Very streamlined.
Yes, it travels a maximum speed of 340 kilometres an hour.
Okay.
And at that speed, the driver can't see any signs or signals. They have to have all of it on a computer display on the lights, not computer, little lights, on the desk. So, and that will show him at what distance he has to be doing what speed. Because when you're doing 340 kilometres an hour, it takes a very long time to slow down.
Oh, imagine.
It would. Yeah.
3 kilometres
Yeah, okay.
That's a long, yes.
at maximum braking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you can see someone, you can't stop.
No.
Yeah. And they have all their lines fenced, the high-speed lines. People don't cross them.
It's good. And you got one more?
You got one more
Yeah.
to show us in the last 3 minutes of the program?
What's this one?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, I think this is the Waratah. This is in Sydney.
Okay.
So I did the simulator for the Waratah, which is very, very technical because they hadn't built it yet. So I had to do it all from engineering documents and specifications. And they've got a very, very complex onboard computer which displays everything on the train to the driver. And we have to simulate the onboard computer.
Yeah.
So that when we create faults and he navigates through his computer, it'll show up all these different values for the pressure or the voltage and tell him what's going on. And he can say, oh, it's such and such an engine that's faulty and shut that one down, for example.
Yeah.
Then I've done a lot more work on the Waratah as well. So I'm a sort of a Waratah expert.
Yeah. Well, Wendy, you've done so many different things in your life that you've shared the diversity of things that you've experienced and pioneering lots of things as well. And I love your stories that you've shared along the way. Very entertaining.
Yeah.
I think our guests would have really enjoyed hearing this episode and the last episode as you've unpacked just snippets of your life, and there's always more to tell. So thank you.
It was a pleasure to come on the show. What I've found is that if life presents you with a certain situation, instead of begrudging it, work on that situation and enjoy it. Because after a while, things change. And then you have different life experiences, different tasks to solve. So if, for example, you think, oh, I'm spending all of my time indoors in the office, it won't last forever. Things will change and enjoy the process.
Beautiful. Great advice.
Thank you for answering the question. You get to answer.
Yes.
That's how you know you must watch our show.
Lots of tips.
So
Lots
many
of
tips,
wisdom.
everybody. This has been Life Burst with Matt and Sarah. You can catch up with us wherever you get your podcasts from, community radio and television, and of course online on YouTube and Facebook. I am Sarah.
And I am Matt. Thanks for joining us today.
Life Bursts is hosted by Matthew Karat and Sarah Freeman, with production by Reese Jarrett and Kay Hoshraw Azadegan. For more episodes of Life Bursts, go to rawcut.com.au. This is a RawCut production.